Let's be honest. When it comes to sex, we can talk about love, relationships, and intimacy all day long. But the moment someone brings up masturbation, the room gets quiet. Eyes dart away, someone coughs, and the conversation dies faster than a phone at 2%. Yet here's the truth. Everyone knows what it is. Most people do it, and nearly everyone has questions about it, even if they don't dare to ask. So let's talk about it, openly, calmly, scientifically. Because whether you whisper the word or say it proudly, masturbation isn't a dirty secret. It's one of the most natural human behaviors, ancient, universal, and biologically beneficial. And what's even more fascinating, it tells us more about who we are, our psychology, our culture, even our technology than almost any other private act. We live in an age where information about sex is everywhere, yet somehow pleasure remains one of the last taboos. Society teaches us to chase productivity, but not to understand our own bodies. We talk about wellness, but rarely about sexual wellness. We teach anatomy, but skip desire. So today, let's peel back the curtain and look at what science actually says about masturbation, how common it is, why people do it, how it changes with age, and what it really means for relationships and self-understanding. Because once you strip away the shame, what you're left with is one of the most human acts there is, and an incredibly revealing one at that. If you've ever wondered whether everyone does it, you're not alone. Surveys have been asking that very question for decades. In 2010, a major U.S. study, the National Survey of Sexual Health and Behavior, set out to understand how Americans engage in sex and self-pleasure. Nearly 6,000 people between ages 14 and 94 were asked about their intimate habits. The results were eye-opening. Men reported remarkably consistent masturbation patterns across all age groups from teenage years to their 90. Lifetime rates ranged from 67% to 94%. That means nearly every man had done it at least once. Even within the past month, anywhere from 43% to 69% of men said they had masturbated recently. But after age 70, that number dropped to around 28%. Still, that's over 1 in 4 men, a reminder that sexual pleasure doesn't retire when you do. Now, what about women? Here, the numbers were lower but still striking. Lifetime rates ranged between 43% and 85%, and monthly rates between 21% and 50%. Even among women over 70, about 11% said they had masturbated in the past month. So yes, women masturbate, a lot. Just not as much as men, at least according to the data. Why the gap? Partly culture. Partly conditioning. For centuries, male pleasure was seen as expected, female pleasure optional or even shameful. But numbers are shifting slowly but steadily. When researchers updated the survey in 2018, they found something interesting. Adults aged 18 to 49 were masturbating at similar rates as before. But among younger teens ages 14 to 17, the percentage who reported doing it dropped from 56% in 2009 to 40% in 2018. Strange, right? We live in an era of hypersexualized media and open conversation, yet fewer young people are masturbating. Why? The researchers had a theory: distraction. With smartphones, streaming platforms, social media, and endless digital entertainment, fewer people are bored. And boredom, believe it or not, used to play a role in curiosity about the body. When your mind isn't constantly occupied, it wanders sometimes to your own pleasure. Now, with instant digital gratification, that natural exploration is being replaced by other forms of stimulation, likes, notifications, screens glowing late into the night. So, it's not that young people are losing desire. It's that they're redirecting it into virtual dopamine loops instead of physical touch. Age also shapes this conversation in ways we rarely discuss. Masturbation is not just a young person's habit. In fact, research suggests that people who stay sexually active alone or with partners into older age often report better mood, improved sleep, and even higher cognitive function. One study looked at over 3,000 European adults between 40 and 79 years old. It didn't just ask how often they masturbated, it asked why. Participants were questioned about their beliefs around sex. Did they think good sex required love? Did they believe older adults could or should remain sexually active? Did they think society talked too much or too little about sex? And here's what the data revealed. Those who believed that sexuality fades with age or that society was too sexualized were much less likely to masturbate. In contrast, people who believed that sexual pleasure remains healthy and valuable throughout life were more likely to do so and to report higher life satisfaction overall. It wasn't age that determined their sexual activity. It was mindset that, finding echoes across nearly every modern sexual health study. Beliefs shape behavior. When people grow up hearing that pleasure is shameful or touch is dirty, they internalize it. Even decades later, those messages affect their confidence, curiosity, and even their willingness to enjoy their own body. And that brings us to one of the most profound truths about masturbation. It's not just about sex. It's about self-perception. To touch yourself without shame is, in many ways, to accept yourself. If you strip away the cultural noise, the guilt, and the awkward giggles, masturbation becomes something far more interesting, a biological and psychological mirror. Every study that looks at masturbation doesn't just measure how often people do it, it measures how we feel about ourselves, our relationships, and our sense of freedom. Because pleasure isn't simply about arousal, it's about connection. Connection to your own body, connection to your emotions, connection to the permission you give yourself to feel good. And that permission, that quiet, unspoken yes to your own body, is shaped by everything from upbringing to culture to what kind of sex education you received or didn't. In countries where sexual health is openly discussed, where pleasure isn't demonized, people tend to masturbate more frequently. It's not because they're more lustful. It's because they're less afraid. One fascinating pattern emerges across the data. Older people who are better educated and who received quality sexual education when they were young are significantly more likely to masturbate later in life. Its simple knowledge reduces fear. Fear suppresses curiosity, and curiosity is the root of both learning and pleasure. That's why masturbation isn't just a sexual act. It's a reflection of how safe you feel in your own skin. In 2018, a global survey by the sexual wellness brand Tenga took this discussion worldwide. Over 13,000 adults were asked about their habits and beliefs. Globally, about 78% of people said they masturbate. Among men, the number ranged from 92% to 98%. Among women, between 76% and 78%. That's nearly 4 out of 5 women around the world, proof that this is not a male thing, but a human thing. When the data was analyzed further, a pattern emerged. Women were more likely to see masturbation as an addition to their sex life, while men were more likely to use it as a substitute when they weren't satisfied sexually. Women tended to masturbate when feeling fulfilled, men when feeling deprived. That's not a rule, but it shows how emotions and context drive human behavior. Women's sexual motivation often intertwines with emotional states. Pleasure for many women is not just physical, but psychological. It's about release, affirmation, and even self-care. Men, on the other hand, often describe masturbation as a tension release, a quick, mechanical act detached from emotion. Neither approach is wrong. They're simply reflections of different wiring, different needs, and different social conditioning. And yet, when both genders describe the after effects, the answers are nearly identical: relief, calmness, better mood, easier sleep. In the same 2010 U.S. study, when researchers looked at frequency, the numbers varied widely. About 25% of people reported masturbating 2 to 3 times a month. Around 20% said 2 to 3 times per week. Fewer than 20% said more than 4 times per week. In other words, there's no normal. Some people masturbate daily, some once a month, some never. The human sexual spectrum is vast, and every frequency can be healthy depending on context. When Tenga updated their global survey in 2021, the pattern was similar but with one twist. Young adults between 18 and 24 were the most frequent masturbators, with 57% saying they did it weekly or more. What's even more interesting is the average starting age, around 15. That's remarkably consistent worldwide. Parents often panic about this, imagining that early self-exploration means trouble ahead. But the data says the opposite. Young people who understand masturbation as a normal part of human sexuality, not as a shameful secret, tend to have healthier relationships later in life. They're more likely to practice consent, communicate boundaries, and experience satisfaction with partners. Why? Because they know their own bodies. Masturbation is often painted as selfish or isolating, but the science says otherwise. Multiple studies link healthy masturbation habits to positive emotional outcomes. It helps regulate mood, reduce stress hormones, and even improve sleep through the release of oxytocin and prolactin, the same hormones involved in post-orgasmic relaxation and bonding. It's a physiological reset button. Beyond the brain chemistry, though, masturbation serves another critical role: self-discovery. For many women, it's the first time they truly learn what their body likes. It's how they understand their rhythm, their responses, their anatomy. Because, let's be honest, traditional sex education rarely teaches women where or how they feel pleasure. Knowing your own pleasure is not indulgence, it's literacy. When women understand what feels good, they communicate better, they set clearer boundaries, and they experience deeper intimacy with or without a partner. But there's another layer that rarely gets attention: what masturbation says about how we see our worth. For some, self-pleasure comes naturally an extension of curiosity and comfort with their body. For others, it's a battle between desire and guilt, and that guilt can come from anywhere: religious messages, cultural expectations, even social media narratives that frame sexual purity as moral superiority. Science can measure frequency, but it can't quantify shame. Yet shame might be the most powerful variable of all. When people feel guilty about self-pleasure, they often disconnect from their bodies. They may internalize that sexual feelings are wrong or that desire itself is something to suppress. Over time, that creates anxiety, repression, and even difficulty with intimacy. That's why one of the most healing parts of masturbation isn't physical release, it's the reclaiming of self. You learn that your body doesn't need permission to feel good. That pleasure isn't a reward, it's a natural response. And that understanding changes everything.